Welcome to the Total Soccer Show and the glorious return of The Bulletin, the show where we round up and discuss the biggest headlines and talking points from the beautiful game. On this episode, we're looking at the 2031 Women's World Cup. We're looking at what's next for managerless Brazil. We're looking at the Club World Cup playoff that seems to be on the cards. And we'll ask why Messi's giant bodyguard won't be running on the field anymore. My name's Ryan Bailey. Joining me today, your friend, my friend, the Taylor Rocco. Hello, Taylor.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. Forgive me for missing part of that introduction. I was trying to finish up my research by counting the number of clubs that Dorival Jr. has managed, or number of teams he has managed. It's a lengthy list. It took me quite some time to count.
The guy, there was a show called The Littlest Hobo. It was about a little dog that just kept moving on and on. Every day it was in a different location. Dorival Jr. Right there. Wikipedia page.
What a link.
Yeah.
The Littlest Hobo.
I'm not calling Dorival Jr. a hobo, to be clear. I'm saying he's been at a lot of places.
No, you're just comparing him to one.
You're just comparing him to the dog in The Littlest Hobo. Not
dog.
Even the hobo.
It was a cute dog. Also, probably would have mismanaged a national team had it had the opportunity.
Yeah.
2013, man. Flamenco, Vasco da Gama, and Fluminense all in 1 year. That was a big year for him.
Yeah. 26
for the dog,
jobs.
that is.
26 jobs on Wikipedia, Taylor. 26 jobs. That's a lot.
It really is. I was genuinely counting it. It did take me some time because I kept losing track. But here we are. I can count all the way to 26.
Taylor, have we ever done a manager Wikipedia game?
We probably should.
I don't think so. Dorival Jr. feels like one that is ripe for manager Wikipedia game.
I think you could do Billy Joel, We Didn't Start the Fire. You could do one of those, the entire song just of clubs that he has managed.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're all like some of them are lower level Brazilian clubs, so the names get a little bit difficult to rattle off correctly. But I'm down.
Okay.
Juventude, Sport Recife, Avaí, São Caetano. Yeah, it gets tricky.
It works.
There you go. We'll work on the chorus later on in the show. Do stay tuned for that, listener. Joe Lowry's also here. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Hey, Ryan, I think I'm doing better than Dorival Jr. Actually, maybe I'm not, because he's probably still getting paid bank to not do work. So maybe not.
Maybe he gets paid more to not do work than to do work, if his contracts are set up right.
Something to be said for that. Between that and if I could manage that with also getting to enjoy 2 World Cups on U.S. soil in the next 6 years, life could be worse. 2031 World Cup, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go indeed. We'll talk about that very shortly, but not before saying hello to Graham Ruthven. Hello, Graham.
Hello, Ryan Bailey. How are you? Are you hiding any bananas in your pocket today? Anything to surprise us there?
This is not a euphemism, listener. We used bananas as a method of determining draft order in our USMNT draft earlier in the week. When my kids got home from school that day, they were like, "Daddy, why have you drawn on the bananas?" I didn't have a good reason.
Yeah, there wasn't a good reason. Even if you explained to them why there were numbers on bananas, it's not a good reason.
I wish you should have just said serious work things and just left it at that. I don't know what my dad does.
Understand. Daddy business stuff. Yeah. You should see how I filed my tax returns. They were on oranges.
Just also on bananas.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. Before we get into the bulletin, patreon.com/Total Soccer Show for all our bonus content, including bonus episodes, bonus video, and access to our Discord server where all the cool kids are hanging out and voting on the USMNT draft, by the way. It's a close vote.
No,
or maybe it's not.
It's really not, unfortunately.
Okay.
It was that vote for Ike shout right at the end. That's what did it.
It was Graham promising. It was Graham promising to bribe the people. That's what it was. Let's be honest.
Well, listener, if you want to see Graham's unethical approaches to the voting, you can check out the Discord.
How democracy works these days.
It is true. That is true.
Graham
buying votes doesn't always work. That's what
Graham did shut down voting precincts in certain Taylor Rockwell-centric areas, so it felt a little shady, in my opinion.
He was Graham-mandering everything.
Exactly.
In this vote. That's what we found.
Fried Mars bars handed out willy-nilly. Yeah, it's the whole thing.
But do check out the USMNT draft from earlier this week if you haven't done so already. Let's get to the bulletin. Shall we start with that news that Joe teased there just a moment ago? It is the big announcement that it seems that the 2031 Women's World Cup will be coming to the United States. Gianni Infantino confirmed in his address to UEFA's annual Congress in Belgrade. The quote here, "I can confirm we've received 1 bid for 2031 and 1 valid bid for 2035. The 2031 bid is from the USA and potentially some other CONCACAF nations. The 2035 bid is from Europe, from the home nations." That, of course, being the United Kingdom. So this needs to be ratified, Joe, at next year's FIFA Congress. But here we go. Another World Cup, as you mentioned, coming to the US.
Yeah, and I'm stoked for this. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. This will absolutely be in the United States, and maybe, as you mentioned, Ryan, some other CONCACAF members as well. Likely Mexico. I don't know for sure, but maybe Canada, Jamaica, Costa Rica. Those were mentioned by Henry Bushnell for Yahoo. We'll see what that ends up looking like. It's worth noting that there is a belief that this World Cup in 2031 will have 48 teams rather than 32, which I think then you start to see some other nations brought into the fold to help host some games. Taylor is reeling a little bit. I don't know for sure if that's going to happen, but it very much seems like that's where the wind is blowing at the moment. This whole thing is weird, right? FIFA awarding World Cups is always weird because along the way in this whole process, you just had Spain's FA saying last week that Spain and Morocco and Portugal would combine to bid for 2035, and then Johnny comes out and says, basically, yeah, the UK is getting 2035, Spain, take a seat. I don't understand. A lot of this feels weirdly like a farce. And we see that on the men's side as well, of course. We saw it with Saudi Arabia. We saw it with the 6-team World Cup coming in 2030. But at the end of the day, I got to say, I am really excited about this. The opportunity to have a men's World Cup in 26 and a women's World Cup in 31, even having it spaced out a little bit further. Because if we remember, the original U.S.-Mexico bid was for 2027, right? It was for the summer after the men's World Cup in 26. And right before that was supposed to come to a vote, basically, the U.S. shifted to 2031. And they essentially said that shifting is going to allow us to better kind of take away things from the 26 World Cup and better support the host cities and kind of ramp into the 2031 tournament. I like the longer timeline. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
The way these tournaments have been awarded is very much a pattern under Gianni Infantino as FIFA president, right? Where it seems like, and maybe you guys have more information on this than I do. I couldn't find this in any of the reporting. I'm confused as to whether the bidding process has closed. So, Ryan, you said this will be ratified at, whatever you said, FIFA Congress next year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What happens if there is another bid that comes in? Has that now closed? Because it used to be a very regimented, and look, there were problems with this process as well, as has been well documented with Qatar and Russia. But it used to be, there was a window, you would place your bids, that window would close, it would then go to Congress, they would vote on it. Infantino's tenure seems to have been defined by these quite murky processes where, as you say, Joe, the US and Mexico, they were originally going to bid for 2027. Brazil then it emerged they were kind of the front runners for that. They've now shifted to 2031. I think the UK wanted 2031 as well. They've now shifted on to 2035. And Infantino's just come out at this UEFA Congress in Belgrade and said they're the sole bidders for those tournaments. Like, how have they got to that point, and are they accepting bids for those tournaments still? That's where I'm a little bit unclear.
I think they might still be accepting bids. The implication I've gotten, or maybe this is just my conspiratorial brain, is essentially that, like, when you have it with multiple bidders coming in, I feel like that's when you might get more, I guess not infighting, but maybe more allegations, more public criticism of a bid, public criticism of why this country should host and not this country. And I think you automatically create tension and animosity and potentially division. And I do wonder if maybe there has been an attempt to streamline things so that you could sit down and say, look, they're going to host in 2017 or 2027. Why don't you all host in 2031? Oh, you all want one too? Okay, how about 2035? Like, I could see it being that level of let's just stretch it out, let's get it all scheduled, but let's make sure there isn't conflict so we don't have infighting that doesn't lead to somebody saying, hey, those guys weren't even in the conversations last week, and then they showed up with several golden briefcases, and now they're in the conversation. I think they're trying to avoid maybe any sort of look that things are off-center, and at the same time, I think by making it murky, that's a strange way to make it look like things are more transparent.
Is there any downside to this? Is it all just upside for US soccer, having this tournament come?
I mean, it's a lot of work. I would think there's a lot more upside than downside here, right? When you think about the real value that World Cups in the U.S. have had in the past, and the U.S., of course, has hosted a Women's World Cup before. I think the hope is, maybe more than anything, you see more grassroots participation in soccer, and that is a bottom-of-the-funnel increase that helps the sport in the long run in the United States. And I think we're absolutely going to see that happen, both in 26 and now in 31. I think it's interesting that now U.S. soccer had sort of shifted that approach, along with Mexico, I suppose, at the time, had shifted that approach from, hey, we're going all in for 27 to, hey, we're really going for 31. And maybe that was always a play to get 31 on the table. I don't know. I'm obviously not privy to those conversations behind closed doors. But I do think there is something to be said for this longer timeline being better for the U.S., where maybe there's a little less. I honestly don't know if there would have been World Cup fatigue, but maybe there would have been in back-to-back summers leading into then the Olympics as well. Getting to have this 5-year runway from one World Cup to the next, I think maybe catches like multiple, I don't know, this is not a term, but like micro generations of kids to play soccer along the way, and also has a little bit of breathing room for changes and things to happen and for you to actually learn things from 26 and take them away and make them actionable to implement for 31. I really actually love this concept of having them spaced out a little bit more.
So do I.
And I think this is a pretty ideal situation for soccer in the U.S.
Yeah, I agree, Joe, because my fear with 26 is that after that tournament, the momentum is just going to stop, and, you know, whether it's commercial entities or whoever, the Federation or FIFA, just kind of go, well, that's that done. And I think if you have it in 27, I hadn't quite considered the Olympics as well, being in LA as a factor there as well. I think you almost bunch them together and say, well, look, they're sort of the same thing, it's the same focus, it's the same time period. I like this being in 2031 so that in some way we can continue the momentum of 2026, and that can pull us forward into 2031, and hopefully that has some sort of positive impact on the grassroots of the game.
Yeah, because I really do think that that's where, if you think about the benefits that World Cups can have now in a country like the U.S., maybe it's not the same for every country, but if we think about, and there was discussion about this in our Discord the other day, if we think about the legacy of the 94 World Cup in the U.S. being Major League Soccer, right? And I think it was, right? If we think about the legacy of that tournament being a league being established, that's not going to be the legacy of 2026. That's not going to be the legacy of 2031, where the NWSL is established and is thriving in a way that it hasn't previously, right? Still work to do there, of course. But the NWSL is a very, very good league that is growing. It's growing in number of teams. It's growing in quality. This World Cup in 2031 is not going to help propel the NWSL forward in like a ridiculous way. At least I'd be surprised if that happened. Same for 26 with Major League Soccer, especially given that MLS has done nothing so far to try and take advantage of that in an outsized way. The real benefits of these World Cups are going to be getting more kids playing soccer, right? And that ultimately that is the way to improve soccer status in this country, right? That is how you get more people thinking about and engaging with soccer, is you get their kids playing it and you get families paying attention to it, and you work in those sorts of levels really, really deep in the grassroots rather than trying to always act at the top of the funnel. There's room for both. But these World Cups are going to be about grassroots participation. Of that, I'm pretty confident. And I think we're going to see that increase in a real way after both of these tournaments.
There we go. Wonderful stuff. Good news for American soccer.
Yeah. And good news for all of us on this show. We've all got a World Cup today, which has definitely never happened before.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, England certainly hasn't happened since 1966. America's had several in that period. So very good to see that happening.
Read into
well.
that, Ryan. I want you to read into that.
Yeah,
correctly.
I'll take a good hard look at that one, Joe. Thank you very much. Also, in the unlikely event that we and podcasts haven't been replaced by AI by that point, we will be, of course, the 2031 World Cup. Exciting times, indeed. Did I just terrify you all with that statement? Maybe I did.
Yeah, how old will we be then?
Joe's going to be in his mid-20s. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I'll just have turned 15, so yeah, I'm excited. Entering my prime.
There we go. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's get into it with Brazil and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to the Bulletin. Let's go to Dorival Jr., who was fired after just over a year in the Brazilian hot seat. Dorival the Explorer? Will you give me that one? 26 jobs.
Well, on the basis of his Wikipedia page. Yeah.
There we go.
Well
Thank you very much. Brazil won 7, drew 7 and lost 2 with him. They are 4th in World Cup qualification after 14 games with 4 left to play. 18 qualifiers in CONMEBOL for the World Cup. Woo! That's a lot for relatively few teams involved. But, I mean, Graham, we're not in a position where Brazil are going to be worrying about qualifying or anything. But, of course, they are looking for a new coach as they go into next year's World Cup.
Yeah, so this was a response to the 4-1 defeat to Argentina that happened in the last window, which, by the way, Messi was missing for that game, no Lautaro Martinez as well, so it was a depleted Argentina who still absolutely thumped Brazil in that game. And as you say, Ryan, their qualification campaign has been pretty poor. There's 10 teams in CONMEBOL. I think 7 qualify. Brazil are still going to be at that tournament. But they're 4th at the moment. They also weren't great at the Copa America last summer when they only made the quarters and went out to Uruguay. My main takeaway here with this news is that Brazil are a mess. They have gone through 3 managers since Qatar. Fernando Diniz, Ramon Menezes were interim managers after Chiche left after the 2022 World Cup, but they were in place for longer than like your standard interim manager because Brazil were waiting on Carlo Ancelotti. That was their big plan. They wanted a big-name manager for this World Cup cycle. That was the guy they wanted. They'd had encouragement that Ancelotti would take the job. And, of course, he didn't take the job, and he stays at Real Madrid. So they stick with Dorival Jr., and so Brazil as a national team have this identity crisis. They've gone from Diniz, who, as far as I can remember, I mean, we spoke about him at the time, he was the manager who was kind of moonlighting as Brazil manager while he was either Flu or Flamenco manager at the time. I can't remember which one it was, but he was working in the club game at the same time. He's got this really interesting identity as like someone who's tactically fluid. Generally speaking, it's attack-minded football. But they've gone from him to Dorival Jr., who is essentially the Brazilian Big Sam. That might be going a little bit far, but he has a reputation for being a firefighter, as his Wikipedia page makes clear. And his whole thing is he makes teams difficult to beat and well organised, that obviously goes against the grain of what the personality of Brazilian soccer is. And I remember what the criticism of him when he was the Brazil national team manager. It was all very similar stuff. So Brazil do not know what they are at the moment. They do not know what they want to be. And that World Cup is fast approaching, and they now need a new manager.
As rough as this is for Brazil, Taylor, seeing a powerhouse like Brazil struggling is kind of good for everyone else, isn't it?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in the sense that it potentially opens up opportunities for other nations to make runs in the World Cup that Brazil might have otherwise made. I sort of go the other way. I see it more as a commentary on the present state of global football, that I think you have so many young players from Brazil moving abroad at such a young age, oftentimes centralized in one of the top 5 European leagues or some of the bigger teams in Europe. And there's an idea that you have very young Brazilian players moving on before they truly become Brazilian, quote unquote, before they have an opportunity to kind of develop their skill set, develop some of the dribbling, some of the flair. And so they're going to these clubs at a younger age. They're being kind of steeped in the traditions or the tactics of those clubs or of those leagues. And so you end up with a bunch of players coming back to play for Brazil who come from different tactical setups, come from different leagues, but all have been trained in different but similar styles that don't really reflect a truly Brazilian style or an authentically Brazilian style. And so in some ways, it's interesting that you have this global powerhouse that's kind of down on their luck and we're not sure how they will respond. At the same time, it's not necessarily because they have done silly things. They haven't done the smartest of things, I would say. However, I think it's much more about the kind of present state of global football and where the power and money truly rests that you have youngsters moving at such a young age.
I'm curious, Taylor, I think there could totally be something to that. How does Argentina being maybe the best team in the world factor into that? Because surely they face a similar situation. I don't know. I don't have the answer for what's wrong with Brazil, by the way. I want to make that clear. So I'm not just trying to shoot people down. How does Argentina or Colombia, who have been excellent, or Uruguay, how do they factor into this?
I think, and you will have, small, national teams that can be successful where a lot of their players aren't playing there domestically. That can even be European ones, like Belgium, I think is a prime example of that. I think there's an idea that Brazil national teams have historically had a very specific Jogo Bonito identity, that they have had this, you play beautiful soccer brilliantly and you play simple soccer brilliantly, but there is a flair to it, I think, that maybe within Brazil, within the Brazilian national team, that maybe other ones don't. And I think when you lose that identity, you sort of become a team that is about, okay, how do we bring in a firefighter to get the Brazilian Big Sam to get the kind of most workmanlike but consistent series of results? I'm not sure that kind of reflects the Brazilian ethos. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but that seems to be a pretty common consensus opinion, at least within Brazil, compared to other nations, I would say.
I think there could totally be something there when you think about the fact that Brazil does seem to historically have, and I think some of this is a little bit myth, but I think there's some kernel of truth in it, that Brazil has had that style and that way of playing sort of ingrained in a lot of these players. The thing that I'm not totally convinced by in that total point is I don't necessarily think that these players have to be playing professional soccer in Brazil for years and years to develop that. I think, honestly, a lot of that stuff is ingrained in players before they're an adult. I think a lot of that stuff is ingrained in players where they're fighting for their professional livelihoods before they ever step on a professional soccer field, right? They are fighting with hundreds of kids who are very, very good every single day to make it past U12, to make it past U14, to make it past those battles and that culture of what it seems like, frankly, at times the U.S. seems to lack. that energy and that way of playing, I think, is established before you even hit the professional ranks in some ways. So not to say that you don't lose something potentially by going and moving, but I do think there are other issues here. I think Brazil's lack of like a real game-changing number 9 to create the sort of space that Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo could really benefit from on the wing, Rafinha as well. I mean, the talent in this team is still so real. Like, I look at the quality here, and I'm not so sure personally that Brazil aren't still one of the 5 best teams in the world and are just in an unbelievably chaotic stretch. But that chaotic stretch has stemmed on for quite some time. So maybe there are deeper-seated issues here. But they're still pumping out players, man. I'm still real scared of this team.
I don't feel great about their defense. Looking at their defense, their attack is absolutely incredible. Like Vinicius, Rodrigo, Rafinha, Savinho, Endrick, Lucas Paquetá.
Well played. Ryan, hats off to you.
I mean, he might have a ban by
that might
next
be
summer.
that's the real crisis. He might get that lifetime ban and not play the World Cup.
You all are, Lucas Paquetá aside, like, you all are joking a little bit, but like, if you read those names again though, Graham, even there, like, it does, like, you like Vinicius, Rafinha, Rodrigo, Savinho, like, it was a little bit of a drop there. Savinho is very good, don't get me wrong, but I think you look at some of the Brazil national teams of the past where it's like, they have potential World Cup winners not even in the squad. That is how deep their attacking talents truly are.
Yeah, that's fair, but that's not the benchmark that I'm setting, right? I'm comparing them to other countries, and so we don't even need to go to Savinho. We've got Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Rafinha, who are like world-class players at the moment. Their midfield as well is, like, there's a drop-off from that level, but you've got Joe Linton, Ederson at Atalanta, João Gomes, I'm a big fan of his. Matheus Cunha is listed as a midfielder in the where I'm looking. I'd say he's more of a forward. So yeah, there's still real talent there.
I do think though there is something to what you're saying, Taylor, even if I disagree with the winger assessment there. I think there is something to be said that this is not the all-time peak of the Brazil talent pool, right? They are still absurdly talented when you look at their roster, but the fact that I mentioned the number 9 thing, Graham, you rightly point out the midfield is not, it's not Argentina's midfield. It's not France's midfield. It's not Spain's midfield, certainly, right? So there are weak points in this team relative to the past, and even relative to some other elite teams. There are also some real strengths in this team relative to others in the world right now. And that's why ultimately I come back to, I still think Brazil are both going to be fine in a long-term sense. Mm-hmm. I even think they're going to be fine in 26. Like, the whole manager thing right now is a question mark. Ancelotti came out and said, again, that I'm with Real Madrid basically until my contract ends after June of 2026. Technically, I guess you could slot him in. It's not impossible. Yeah, you can't slot him in. I think the World Cup's probably already started by then. Ancelotti's not coming around, so it sounds like they're going to go with Al Hilal's. You think, Graham?
I think Ancelotti's going to be out that job this summer. Like, I know he's out of contract until 2026, but the Athletic reported like a couple of weeks ago that they've already started talking to Xabi Alonso. He's getting asked about it in every press conference, which has been the way of things for Ancelotti for the last 3 years. So he could win the Champions League and things come back around again. But it feels more feasible this season that he might leave in the summer, and then of course he's available. So
yeah, if I suppose if that happens, I guess. Man, people can ask what they want in press conferences. I'm not sure I'm buying that as a data point here, but
yeah, the point I'm just making is the pressure has never been greater than it is now. It feels like it's an ever present around Real Madrid right now is what's going to happen with Ancelotti at the end of the season.
If you're Ancelotti, Graham, you're in the summer. You do leave Real Madrid. You've got Milan here. You've got Brazil here. Do you go back to the comfort and security of Milan?
No, you take Brazil.
Yeah.
You take Brazil until World Cup. Brazil, I didn't get a chance to answer your question, Ryan. I don't take any pleasure in Brazil being bad. I think Brazil are the most romantic, soccer nation in the world, and so I think soccer is richer. This is maybe a comparison that's not going to hit for the non-F1 fans, but I'd compare it to Ferrari. See, when Ferrari are good, F1 is better for Ferrari being good, and Brazil are the Ferrari of international soccer. So it's been a while since they've done anything at a World Cup. So I'd like to watch a good, fun team again. I'm not convinced Ancelotti's the guy to make that happen, although maybe he is. Maybe he'll just say go and do your thing like he does with Real Madrid. But yeah, I want them to be good next summer.
Who are the Scotland of F1, Graham?
Haas, or we wouldn't qualify for F1. There's only 10 teams.
Does
so
Peugeot have an F1 racing team?
They do not. So that we're the Peugeot of F1. That's right.
There you go. Appropriate.
The Pontiac Aztec. That's what Scotland is. That's more the United States than anything else. I would add one other little thing. It's worth noting that Brazil won the 58 World Cup, 62 and 70, not a bad run. Then they didn't win until 1994. So you do have a 24-year gap there where they go without winning a World Cup. And I think I bring up that point just to showcase that there have been times in their history where they have had downturns in form, where they haven't been able to put it together, where even if they did have lots of talent, that talent didn't come together to truly elevate the team. So it's not a unique cycle to Brazil. It's not a unique situation, but it is a very tricky one. And I would add that, like in the 80s and early 90s, you also didn't have nearly as much money flowing into the game in specifically certain leagues with specifically certain teams. So I think it does make it a harder thing to overcome, but certainly one that they could, because they have talent, they continue to have talent, and they will continue to have talent.
Okay, very good. We need to take a quick break. Before we go there, one final question for the group. Who is the hardest working person in soccer, and why is it Dorival Jr.'s agent?
Yeah.
Is there a
Aston
comparison?
Hazard, I think, frankly.
Yeah, there we go.
That's well done.
There's not another answer, yeah.
That guy must be... Oh, he must live
It's
in
just
a nice
automated
house.
at this point. He just has like a list that he auto sends out as soon as there's an availability.
Wonderful stuff. Yeah, he scheduled it every couple of months, the emails to go out. Good stuff. Very good. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking about Club World Cup and the potential playoff that's happening there. Thomas Müller potentially coming to MLS and much more. Join us then. Total Soccer Show, welcome back to the Bulletin. Let's turn our attention to this summer's Club World Cup and the news that FIFA is considering a one-game playoff to determine the team that's going to occupy Club Leon's spot in this summer's Club World Cup. The victor of that playoff would take home $9.5 million in prize money awarded to qualified teams. That's not a bad incentive. They would be Chelsea's first opponent in the tournament, which is coming once again this summer. All right, Graham, why is this happening? Why are Leon out? Why are we doing this?
Yeah, so this has happened because Club Leon have been chucked out because they have the same owners as Pachuca. FIFA just one day woke up and realised, oh, geezy peeps, we can't let this happen, despite the fact they've had the same owners for years and multi-club teams play each other all the time in other competitions. So they have come up with this plan to have, as you say, Ryan, LAFC and Club America face each other in a playoff. LAFC, because they were the runner-up to Club Leon in the 2023 CONCACAF Champions Cup, or Champions League if it was called that at that time, I can't quite remember. And Club America because, quote, they are the top-ranked team in the FIFA Club World Cup Confederation ranking through which qualification is also determined. The truth, of course, is they've just made this up as a way to get two big teams in, just like they made up Inter Miami's qualification process as well. The whole thing's a farce.
Cool.
Well, and so, sorry, Dad won't beat on that because Graham is totally correct. The whole thing is an absolute farce. This whole situation was raised by Alajuelense, a team that I hesitate to name because I struggle to pronounce. They've basically raised their hand and was like, hey, FIFA, Leon and Pachuca have the same owners. And FIFA's like, oh no, we'll look into it. And
snitches get stitches.
And the whole reason that... The whole reason
or
that,
a $9 million playoff spot, one or the other. Yeah,
that's nice. Alajuelense raised this because they wanted the spot, and they thought that they'd earned it, and FIFA's like, oh, sweet summer child. No. This is going to either LAFC or Club America. You can sit down. That's how this happened. So it's brutal for Costa Rica. But
wow, that's a real bless your heart moment right there.
Very much so. Oh, sweetie. Oh, no.
Maybe I want to say, like, there are rules, though, right? Like that you can't be directly owned by the same person, and you can get around that with, like, well, we have a different ownership group. There's no overlap in the kind of controlling interest of one club versus the other, which is how Red Bull does it. I think it's how City gets around it as well. But here, it is more or less direct ownership of two different clubs, which is prohibited. It just is also the case that it didn't feel like FIFA cared, and so one club kept sort of raising that hand and kept threatening to take action, that they were like, all right, fine, we'll deal with it. So, like, I think that has become the narrative that, like, oh, they just wanted to get either the biggest team in CONCACAF in or an LA-based MLS team in. But I think there is at least a little bit of, like factual truth to the idea that you can't have the same owner owning two teams that are competing against each other, theoretically at least.
Yeah, that's true. And I believe Liga MX has banned an owner having real stakes in two teams in Liga MX as of like 2027, I think is when that's supposed to go into effect. Apparently, and ESPN had a good piece about this. The sort of mutual owner in question, as I understand it, its name is Jose de Jesus Martinez Patino, which is an incredible name. Apparently, they came out and said ahead of the Club World Cup draw, which was, back in December, right? Yeah, December of last year. Martinez Patino said, we told FIFA that they were aware in the most recent Liga MX owners meetings that Lyon is the team that we will have to sell control of. And ESPN reported that as of now, according to government records, there's been no change in the share of distribution or the introduction of a new investor into either club. So it seems like they came out and said, hey, we're going to do it, and then just didn't do it. Now La Jolense hold their hand up and say they haven't done it, and that's where we're at.
So it's not just like the guy who brings Infantino his coffee and shines his head in the morning is coming in and saying, oh, did you see those two are owned by the same people? It's more
No,
that
it certainly doesn't seem that way.
They're trying to wait for them to go, restructure, do some bureaucratic movements like Red Bull do to make sure this can happen, and they just didn't do it, basically. Is that fair?
That's my understanding. Yeah, Taylor, were you going to say something?
I was going to say that guy is also Dorival Jr., the guy that comes in every single day to rub Infantino.
Or his agent.
Yeah.
And that's the most lucrative gig of them all, to be clear. That's the one that pays the real bucks. Yeah.
So it's really interesting though, because I think if you are coming at this from a neutral standpoint or the Club World Cup is happening, I guess we should talk about that, which is my perspective. It's like, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah, you can't have two clubs with the same owner participating. And then you watch anybody who has any sort of interest in this, especially like Mexican-American commentators or Mexican TV pundits have been very angry about this and have been very angry about the removal of Leon, have spotlighted that you're also kicking James Rodriguez out of the tournament, which is a player that would be fun to watch. But there is also a feeling that this feels kind of arbitrary. They're doing it just to make money, extending it to why not just have an open playoff and invite all the big teams that haven't made it and just let Liverpool and Barcelona duke it out to see who should be involved. And I guess at least they're not doing that. They're keeping it to the same confederation at least. It does still feel sort of arbitrary that you have the losing finalist versus the highest ranked team in CONCACAF playing each other.
The whole tournament is a farce. I'm sure once it kicks off, I will watch games and sort of get into it because I can't help myself. But the qualification process is a farce. There is no process. Like Chelsea are there because they won the 2021 Champions League. I mean, is there even a single player who played in that final?
Ridiculous.
Reece James. That's the only one that I can think of. Reece James has to be the only player who's still at that team from 2021. The TV deal is a farce, clearly overinflated because of some form of underhanded deal that involves Saudi Arabia. There's been some reporting on that. It's $1 billion TV deal. There's reporting that it involves something to do with the Saudi Arabian World Cup. And then the prize money, you mentioned, I can't remember if it was you, Ryan, or Taylor, the $9 million that the team that wins this playoff is going to get.
Yep.
This is a $1 billion prize pot for this tournament, which FIFA, Infantino, has attached to this tournament purely to make people care about it. But it's something that is going to warp the elite level of football. If you win this tournament, you're going to get $100 million, which, even if you are a Premier League team, is pretty much the same as what you're going to get for a full season of Premier League TV rights, which, by the way, Premier League TV rights are already extortionate and warp the market. If you give LAFC $9 million for qualifying for this tournament, that's more than teams get from Apple, the Apple TV deal, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
It's just, from that point of view as well, it's a farce of an idea.
Graham, phenomenal point that you've made there across the board. I think is a really good introduction to just how wild this whole tournament is. Yeah, the $1 billion prize pool is, to be even more specific, is not just to make people care, it's to make the teams care, right?
Yeah.
Like FIFA had to get them to bring their players, and the teams are going to bring their players because there is a paycheck waiting at the end of the road.
Is there? Are we sure the players are getting any of this? Because I also do wonder.
I didn't say the players were getting some of it. I said there's a paycheck at the end of the road.
Okay.
I do think they will get some, but I don't know how that's going to work, to be honest. This has got to be, if this happens, right, and this is still not 100% guaranteed to happen. Leon is going through an appeals process. It does seem like the wind is blowing strongly in the direction of this random playoff between LAFC and Club America. I got to be honest, I'm going to be up for this game. Like, I'm curious to see what happens. This has got to be the most expensive game in American soccer history, right? Like, there cannot be, you don't get this much money for winning MLS Cup. I don't think there's a single other game that's been played in American soccer that has this much money at stake. So this matters.
Is going to do one that eclipses it. I'm
yeah,
sure.
can't wait.
Baller League coming soon.
Can't wait for that. Like, this is potentially, as Graham said, transformative sort of stuff. LAFC doesn't really need the money. They're going to spend money anyway. But I believe Sounder at Heart and Jeremiah O'Shan had reported, or had read the rules closer than I have, that these MLS teams can't just pocket the money, that they have to actually go and reinvest it. Owners can't just put it in their back pocket and say thank you very much. Some of it will have to go to the players, certainly, and other chunks will probably be reinvested into facilities, scouting, personnel, players. I don't know what that's going to look like. This is a legit advantage. These MLS teams already got extra allocation money for getting to compete in the Club World Cup that the other 27 teams, or 28 if LAFC don't make it in, which, let's face it, they probably won't. Club America are a better team, that the other MLS teams didn't get, and now they're getting a $10 million windfall plus $1 million for every draw they get, and that's probably all they're looking at is maybe a draw or maybe a win in the group stage, which would get you $2 million. It's a lot of money. And that FIFA is just picking these teams out of a hat, with the exception of the Sounders, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, and then literally picking them out of a hat with Inter Miami. Right?
Yeah, right. That's what I mean.
Hey,
Yeah.
they aren't fair and square. The rules were if you lose to Atlanta in a playoff, you get into the Club World Cup.
Right.
That's how they did it.
I wish that's
Don't
how
be
they actually
unfair,
did them.
Taylor.
Joe, they're getting extra allocation money. Are they getting extra spots as well? That's the thing I've seen
Like
referenced,
roster spots?
2 or 3 times. Yeah, but I haven't.
I don't
actually
not
been
that
able
not
to
that
find
I've heard,
them.
and
Okay.
I don't think anybody's built their roster in that way. No, I don't
Like
think so.
2 different things I watched both said like LAFC are gonna have 6 open roster spots if they win this to kind of play around with. And it felt like they were citing something very specific, but maybe one was just citing the other.
They may in fact have open roster spots, but they won't open roster spots by winning this potential playoff with Club America, I suppose.
Cool.
And also, maybe good to note that this game would likely, fill up SoFi Stadium. So even if LAFC lose the playoff, they're getting paid out of this, right?
I mean, FIFA is surely going to take all that money, right? Don't you think?
Who knows?
I guess that's a good point. Who knows? That is the summary of the Club World Cup, folks. Who knows?
They're a
Indeed.
nonprofit, Joe. They share it with all.
Oh, I mean, I can kind of believe that all, and I do mean all, are getting a piece of that pie, even
All
people
of
that
the
maybe
executive
shouldn't.
committee,
But I
yes.
mean, the money is going places, but FIFA are probably going to like to be in control of where that money goes.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. Well, good to see FIFA showing integrity for this made-up rule for this made-up tournament. So looking
After
forward to-
somebody said we're going to take you to court if you don't. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Stellar stuff. All right, why don't we move over to Major League Soccer? Thomas Müller, at 35 years old, might be coming, Taylor, to these here shores.
Yeah.
That's exciting stuff, isn't it? I want to see him do the horsey celebration somewhere in the States. That's what I want to see.
I would love for that to happen for you. I'd love for him to go to Charlotte. Why not? I am unclear how specific the links to MLS are versus Bayern aren't going to renew him. That bridge seems to be pretty comprehensively burned by both sides now, and so it feels like now he would like to continue playing. Bayern have offered him lots of different opportunities in the front office, but they're not going to bring him back on reduced wages for one more year. So if he wants to continue playing, then he has to kind of look at other options, other opportunities, and MLS would be one of those. He's gotten a lot of encouragement from different players who played here, including Lothar Matthäus. I don't remember that going particularly well when Matthäus played in MLS, but he has said that he should try something new, go over to MLS and experience it for a season or 2. So I don't know how concrete things are. Maybe Joe or Graham can speak to that. But I think it is an interesting moment because Thomas Müller, even an aging Thomas Müller, I think could still be an incredibly useful and strong player in Major League Soccer and in many other leagues, but MLS in particular for the purposes of this conversation.
Yeah, Taylor, you've done a good job of outlining the German side of the story. The only one thing I would add, and you kind of got to this, but there was a perception basically that he was going to get a deal, and so his representations have been talking to Bayern, and so there's surprise, there's shock on their part that they've kind of pulled the rug out from under their feet, and all of a sudden he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. So there's a bit of controversy there. Fans are upset.
Who's the sporting director, Graham, at Bayern? He was at Leipzig, I think, and then he left. We talked about him recently. Well, but
I can't remember his name.
supposedly he had said to Thomas Müller, like, if you're willing to go on a reduced wage, the renewal will take minutes to complete because we'll just get it done. It's worth it to us. It's worth it to you. We want you around. And then that was kind of, I think, the operational agreement they were working under. Then they went to have actual talks, and it was like, yeah. Not only is it not going to take minutes, but it's not going to happen at all. So, sorry. And I think that has left a sour taste in certainly Thomas Müller's mouth, but maybe also Thomas Müller's supporters and some Bayern supporters as well.
It's Christoph Freud, whose name escaped me just for a moment. He is the sporting director at Bayern. You're absolutely right, Taylor. He was at Leipzig. Anyway, in terms of the teams that have been concretely linked, I saw a report by Bild and also Sky Sports Deutschland that it was Bild actually that had this story. LAFC have been linked pretty strongly because, and I wasn't aware of this until I read this Bild article, they have a partnership with Bayern. So there's some speculation that in some way he could be continued to be paid by Bayern as like an ambassador for them in the US. And I was trying to join the dots here because obviously LAFC are keeping that DP spot open for a certain Frenchman. Would that maybe permit them to have him on a non-DP contract, but he's still getting paid like a high wage if some of his wages coming from Bayern Munich? So I don't know. I'm kind of speculating a bit laterally there. And then more tentatively, I've seen San Diego and Cincinnati as two other teams that have been linked as well.
Yeah, it's worth noting that at least I haven't seen a single U.S.-based report about anything Thomas Müller related. Maybe I missed something. I would tend to trust that stuff a bit more as far as like legit destinations for Thomas Müller if it was coming from the U.S. side. Not trying to disrespect any of the reporting that's been done so far. I also had a brutal time finding legit reporting on this topic. So I guess I'm just not super sure where all this is going outside of it. Certainly doesn't seem like Thomas Müller is going back to Bayern Munich, and MLS would have to be a possibility for him, no doubt about that. About to be 36 in September. You're 35 until you're 36, according to sources that I've talked to. The LAFC one's interesting because they are keeping that DP spot open, but they're doing it in a really odd way. They've got 3 DPs right now, so they don't have a DP spot open as things stand. They've got Olivier Giroud, Denny Bouanga, and they've also signed Cengiz Under. Under's contract is only up, I think is up on July 31st or the end of August or something like that. His contract is up in the summer, which would give LAFC the chance to go and sign Griezmann if he actually wanted to come over. Graham called that one years ago. That doesn't seem like it's happening this summer. So maybe they go and make a move for Müller. But I think they also could probably find a way to sign Thomas Müller on a non-DP deal, right? Graham, you were sort of talking about this. I think almost regardless of what their DP situation is, remember, they did this with Gareth Bale. There's precedent for them to go and sign a Thomas Müller-esque player on a non-DP deal. The Galaxy did it last year with Marco Reus. It could totally happen there. Since he was mentioned, I think that would be a fun one. They only have 2 DPs, so Müller could be one, or maybe not there. San Diego, you mentioned them as well. They feel like a plausible option. Doesn't really feel like a very San Diego-esque move to me, and sort of how they've built that roster. But maybe Tyler Heaps just loves Thomas Müller, because who doesn't, right? So I think there's something here. We've buried the team that needs to sign Thomas Müller though, which is the Columbus Crew, because the Columbus Crew should sign all the good players, and I want them all to play for Wilfried Nancy at the same time. I cannot imagine getting to cover a Crew team that has Wilfried Nancy dropping banger quotes every day, and Thomas Müller, who is one of the great personalities in this sport. I mean, that's just the dream. Like I might move to Columbus if that happens.
Yeah, the Raumdeuter in Columbus. We love to see it. Very good indeed. Maybe we'll get Müller Light though, rather than real Müller time if he's 36.
I mean, yeah, we're already getting Müller Light at this point, if we're honest with ourselves. I think he's played 860 minutes in the Bundesliga this year. He's not the same player he used to be. And so I think MLS teams, or maybe he goes to Saudi or wherever he ends up, those teams are going to know that, right? It's just a question of what juice is actually left, and we're going to find out.
I feel like Thomas Müller's been playing since I was a small child. I'm still amazed that he's 35. It's incredible.
You're absolutely right, Joe. He hasn't played a huge amount of minutes this season. He doesn't get injured, is the thing. I found an article on the Bundesliga site which was headlined, "Why does Thomas Müller never get injured?" And then I looked at his injury history, and he's obviously had like the odd injury here or there, but not a serious one. And so this season, it's the reason he's not playing isn't because he's been injured. It's just because, Vincent Kompany has better options at this point. I think while he's not injured very often, I think some of the intensity's gone from his game, and so putting him into the current Bayern team has maybe been a little bit awkward this season. But yeah, I'd love to see him in MLS.
Very good. All right, one more little MLS story I wanted to touch on. Messi's bodyguard, Yassine Chueco, the former Navy SEAL, who we've seen many a time sprinting onto the field to stand near Messi as he says, "No, it's okay, this guy can have my photo with him." He's been banned from the touchline. MLS has now decided to take full control of matchday security. Chueco is now only permitted in the locker room and the mixed zone. Quote from him, "I was in Europe for 7 years working for Liga and the Champions League, and only 6 people in that period invaded the pitch. I came to the US, and in 20 months, 16 people have already done so. There's a huge problem here. Let me help Messi." Come on, Chueco. Why don't we let this guy on the field? It's fun.
Yeah. I think also Tom Bogert had reported that this was Inter Miami's call. I must admit, I didn't dive incredibly deep into this story because I don't care. But I do think that we should let Messi's bodyguard go where he wants. Put him on the field as a 12th man, just to really make sure that Miami have that little extra advantage.
Yeah. Or maybe we could do a playoff between several bodyguards, and the winning bodyguard gets 9.5 million and gets to be on the field.
Good. Good.
Yes, that one. I mean, I kind of always thought this was a bit farcical. Like the times when I saw him sprinting onto, I've never seen that before. He says
To stop a child from taking a picture.
He says when he was in Europe, it happened. What did he say? I'm looking for the
6
quote
times.
here. 6 times when he was in Europe. I don't recall that ever happening before, where a bodyguard mid-game, when a team's like in an attack, is just sprinting onto the pitch. I always thought it was a bit. I mean, it was funny, but for a serious soccer league, I always thought it was a bit weird. So. Yeah. He's still getting paid. He's still employed by Messi, just not allowed to go anywhere near the pitch.
It's sad. Symbolist heritage.
He also, according to an article from Felipe, is not actually a Navy SEAL. That's been reported erroneously, and he was not hand-selected by David Beckham, another thing that has been reported. I like the myth around this guy, though. That's pretty great. We should just start creating tall tales about him.
I liked it better before I knew that, frankly.
He can kick a soccer ball over them mountains. That's how good he is.
Maybe he was a Navy walrus. We know that's a superior sea animal.
All right.
All right.
How many votes did that? Well, never mind.
A Navy walrus is not an elite position, I don't think.
All right, one more topic for this here bulletin. Graham, we're going to give you the floor to tell us all about the Copa del Rey semi-finals. We've had some mad games in these semi-finals. We've got a final, I believe, of Barcelona taking on Real Madrid as a result of a couple of bonkers semis, both of which had 4-4 draws, both of which ended in 5-4 aggregates for the respective winners. Wowzers.
Something has been up with the Copa del Rey this season. 2 4-4 games in the semi-finals. The second one coming on Tuesday night when Real Madrid squeezed through against Real Sociedad. That game swung back and forth. I messaged I went too early with my message that La Real were storming the Bernabeu in our Slack because Real Madrid came storming back. But there was a point where it looked like they had done it when they were 3-1 up. Then Jude Bellingham scores to make it 3-2 like seconds later. He's ridiculous, Jude Bellingham. He has to be the most clutch player. There's something, it's almost cartoonish, like the way he scores an equaliser for England at the Euros with an overhead kick, and he scores a crucial equaliser for Real Madrid like 30 seconds after they've gone behind. It's just nuts at this point, and then Antonio Rudiger gets the winner at the end. But it was a great game, but it was a match that showed both the brilliance of Real Madrid in the attack, but also how incredibly weak they are in defence, because La Real do not score goals. They've got one of the poorest attacking records in La Liga this season, and yet they look dangerous every single time they came forward. So I don't know what that says about Real Madrid, but they squeezed through to the final where they will play Barcelona. So we're going to have a Clásico Copa del Rey final. This, to be honest, the Barca Atleti second leg was kind of disappointing, particularly after the 4-4 first leg. Barcelona were by far the stronger team. They won that game 1-0. They go ahead through Ferran Torres pretty early. Sort of felt like Atleti managed themselves out of the match a little bit, where they did the Atleti thing of trying to keep it stodgy and conservative and tight at the back, but didn't really pose any threat themselves until the final 5 minutes when they were sending crosses and long balls into the box. So in truth, Barcelona were pretty comfortable winners there, but I am looking forward to that Clásico final, which I think is happening next month.
Amazing stuff. Very good.
I was really not in on Ancelotti as Brazil manager, but this game and hearing Graham talk about it has me thinking maybe there is something to this. I mean, he's got three Brazilian attackers starting for him. They're conceding 4 goals, but it's a dramatic game at both ends of the pitch. Maybe that's what we need the Brazil national team to be, a team that beats you 4-3 or 5-4. And Carlo Ancelotti seems like he could make that happen, especially if he's somehow able to get David Alaba to play center back for Brazil, which could be tricky, but would allow for some goals going the other way.
Yeah, Jude Bellingham as well. See if he wants to switch over.
Hey, hands
Bellingham.
off. Yeah, we'll see. I imagine Ancelotti like being in the locker room with Brazil and just writing "Go have fun" on the board and then letting them go and play a game. It matches Brazil's vibe in some ways as well. The Yoga
I mean, that's what Scolari used to do. It worked for him for years.
There you go. Yeah, very good. All right, that is the bulletin for another week. Thank you very much, listener, for joining us on this intrepid endeavour. Taylor Rockwell, thank you very much for your insight and expertise as always.
Thank you very much, Ryan Bailey, and thank you very much for continuing to mention and promote walruses as an animal and as a soccer animal specifically.
Goo goo gajoob, indeed. Joe Lowry, thank you very much indeed.
Hey, thanks, Ryan. I'm still reeling from the fact that you asked a Manchester United fan if a global soccer power's downfall was a good thing, and we're surprised that he said no. This was fun. I had a good time.
Hurtful.
Sad trumpet noise.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe.
Sorry. Graham Rutherford, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan Bailey.
Listener, thank you again for joining us on this one. We'll be back on the feed very shortly, but for now, bye!